Hello, everyone. It is the hour that y'all been waiting for. Thank you so much for being here today to celebrate Scarlett St. Clair's latest release, Queen of Myth and Monsters. Now, yes, exactly. As a reminder, at the end of the discussion and the Q&A, that's when we'll do the signing line. We'll take priority first for those who are unable to stand for long periods of time. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, if you're unable to stay for the signing, you are also more than welcome to go to the front desk and leave your books, and we'll make sure they get signed and or personalized. Long personalizations are up to the discretion of Scarlett. No novels within a novel. And be careful what you ask for if you ask for a favorite quote. I'm just saying that. So Scarlett is the best-selling author, of course, of King of Battle and Blood, When Stars Come Out, and many, many more. She is obsessed with Greek mythology, murder, mysteries, and the afterlife. Everything we like, right? Joining in conversation with her is Jenni, one of our owners for the store. So thank you so much, Jenni, for being here with us to do this. Everyone, let's give them a nice round of applause.
Hi. I feel so short.
I mean, I feel taller than normal.
I feel like I'm like a hobbit. Well, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I love it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you guys for coming. I'm very grateful.
We are so excited to have you here. And thank you, Nick, for the introduction.
Okay.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great.
All right. So, for those in the audience who have not read Myths and Monsters yet, I'm going to have a tongue twister all night. Could you introduce the book and the series a little bit? What was the inspiration? What's the setup?
Queen of Monsters is the sequel to King of Battle and Blood. I know I have to answer this question all the time, and I hate answering it. It's the hardest question. But yeah, the inspiration, I guess, for the series was just Adrian and Isolde arguing in my head about Isolde was mad because she didn't understand why Adrian wanted to marry her, and she's like, you don't need a wife, so why do you want to marry me? And he's like, do you want to be a breeding mare, is what he says, and she's like, obviously not. But anyway, so that was like the part like that got them started in my head. And then QMM is like, it's like a feminist manifesto, like that helped me channel all my anger about everything that happens to women in society. And so if you've read it, you probably can pick up on the anger and people are like really nodding their heads. So yeah. So it's definitely Isolde's journey to empowerment and what it means for a female to really be a conqueror in a world that's dominated by men. So that's probably the theme that will be mostly explored in the third book. But it's hard for me to put into words like what this book and the series is like really meant for me, because it's definitely like the epitome of what I aspire to be, who I aspire to be in this world. And so yeah, and the part that's been really interesting to explore for me personally is like my indigenous roots and sort of coming to terms with like how I identify in this world. And it's very emotional. And I really love the book, even though it was very hard to write. And I hope you all feel very empowered after you read it. We'll find out.
Well, next question, and I don't know if this is easier or harder of a question, but why vampires, and why vampires right now? I love vampires, and I'm so glad.
I've always been intrigued by vampires. When Stars Come Out is my YA novel, but I started writing that in high school, and it was vampires originally, and then it turned into something completely not vampires at all. But when I heard Adrian and Isolde arguing in my head, I was like, these are my vampires. And I really wanted to write something that felt like it belonged in the times of Vlad III, but not based on Dracula. But I think Vlad III is very interesting because he is seen as a hero to the Romanian people, but outwardly, people think he's very evil, and he's been made into this caricature of Dracula, right, by Bram Stoker, and that's how people know Vlad III. But within the environment he lived in, he very much protected his people, and he protected them through violence, right? So I found that very interesting, and that was sort of the basis of Adrian's character arc. He's essentially viewed as a very evil person, and he is an evil person. But so I thought that was very interesting. And then I read this book. I found this encyclopedia called the Encyclopedia of Vampiric Mythology. And the author talked about how vampires, as like we know them, are different across cultures because they're a manifestation of a culture's fears. So what we envision as a vampire is very different from what other people envision as a vampire. So I thought that would be really cool to make a culture that's our world based off of all these vampiric type monsters. So it basically just me following my interests, really, which is how I write everything. So, and why vampires right now, there wasn't really no, it's just because I was like, this book is very loud. I could write it very quickly, and I did in 2 months. And yeah, and it worked out really well, I think, maybe. Maybe, I don't know. So, yeah.
I mean, I am a deep lover of vampires. And
yeah. I wanted them
Buffy
to be like, yeah.
Like, is at the core of my personality.
I loved, well, see, I always shipped Buffy and Spike, and that's why I started reading Janine Frost, because her whole, like, Bones series is based, it's her fan fiction of Buffy and Spike, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So, yeah, that's probably
my ever-loving shame. I ship Buffy and Angel.
no!
But I know I'm wrong. I know
I'm wrong, but I still ship them.
I read a lot of fan fiction.
Fan fiction.
But yes,
Where's
Janine
that?
Frost.
Yeah, I love her. I fangirled when I did a live with her. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So what other research did you do? You had the Encyclopedia of Vampiric
I know
Mythology.
it's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah. What other kinds of research did you do? What else did you look into?
If you guys have read Queen of Myths and Monsters, well, I mean, even KBB. Is that a Black Veil Bride shirt? Is that what? Yes. Sorry, I don't really. No, I love them. I went to a concert and I got caught in a mosh pit. I'm not a mosh pit person, even though I'm kind of goth. Totally off topic. But if you've read it, there's in KBB we kind of hint at the witchcraft, right? And it's always been intriguing to me, obviously, that most witch hunts are centered around women and where that comes from. And it's this fear of women and their power. And, how do you continue to oppress these people that give you heirs, right? And because you take something as sacred as childbirth and you turn it into something that's a punishment, is what we basically did in society. And I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. And we still have modern day witch hunts. I don't know if you guys know, but if you watch the news, but there's a pastor, I don't know what church he's at, but he's like, we know people in here are witches, and he's basically trying to create these modern day witch hunts. Yeah, exactly. I roll. It's fucking ridiculous. So all of that kind of culminated in this interest in how do you go from a matriarchal society, because I am Indigenous and we do come from matriarchs. How do you go from a matriarchal society where you view women as sacred? Men are protectors, but that's because their women are so sacred. How do you go from that to a patriarchal society where you oppress women and you turn their power into something that is, for instance, the power of intuition? That turns into, oh, you're too sensitive. You can't make decisions based on your emotions, right? How do we turn into that? So I read Witch by Lisa Lister, which is very interesting, and it talks about how all women are witchy, and our powers at their most basic form are things like intuition, things that we kind of we either take for granted or we kind of ignore now, or we oppress, or we're told obviously you can't make decisions based on that, blah blah blah. And then for instance, giving birth, and there's a book called When God Was a Woman, and it talks about how Christianity sort of corrupted that, the sacred thing that that was turned into a punishment essentially. And I was like, yeah, this is really terrible. So the book is this idea behind like exploring how do you come back to a matriarchal society, like how do you obtain that power again. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting. It made me angry to read what I was reading, and you don't understand it because you still see it in everyday life in 2022, right? You still see people taking away our rights, and you see people still talking about whether or not we should have access to birth control, which isn't just to control birth, right? People have PCOS, they need it. My friends are very much affected by these very real and painful diseases, and men are making decisions about our health care. And some women are supporting that. It's very devastating, I think. I think we can all of us women can agree that it's very devastating. So just a lot of anger in the research, I think.
Other than like is it inverse, like the anger inspiration, what other inspirations did you have that were really dark? You've already mentioned like Janine Frost and scrapping. What other kinds of
for this like literary influences
or more, if you like.
Oh, well, it was mostly just anger. It was mostly just, I really silo myself when I am writing, and I only try to focus on like what I don't like the themes of the book that I kind of want to explore. So I didn't go outside of like the book When God Was a Woman, or Witch by Lisa Lister, or the vampiric mythology. I didn't really go outside of that. So that was that's a boring answer. Sorry.
It goes to the next one, and maybe it's like that in more detail, but like when you were making decisions on creating your lore and your vampires, what sort of things did you think about in terms of like setting boundaries, or how did you define what made a vampire or made something else in your world? Is there anything that
I don't remember. I'm so sorry. I don't, and I think it's still the thing about my fantasy novels. I think is like it's still an exploration. Like in some ways, I don't have everything figured out at the very beginning because it hasn't been revealed to me. So like in part, I'm like, especially with the witches, like it's because we're in that from Isolde's perspective, like we only know what she knows, and I only know what she knows until I write more. So. I think I don't know. It's very hard for me to kind of pinpoint.
Like feel like a evolving.
Yeah, I was asked a lot of questions about world building at my other, and I was like, I don't know. I just did it, and it's the worst answer. It's like I'm sorry, I can't help you. I don't know how to answer this question. So yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of things live in my brain. I was an English writing major in college, and I read a lot, obviously. What you do when you have that degree, and just like my Greek mythology, it just sort of lives in your head, and like you remember that one time you read this one thing about this one thing, and you're like, oh, I can use that, and that's kind of how my brain works. It just cherry picks a bunch of random things that I learned throughout my life.
Well, then I'm gonna not pressure you into a little building question.
I mean, you can definitely ask them, and I will try my hardest.
I do want to ask, and the dedication in QMM is to those of us who have had to survive. And so I wanted to know if you wanted to share a little bit more about that and what you hope your readers who are survivors get from the novel.
When you asked me if I would answer this question, I was like, I won't get emotional. I think women in general have to survive a lot. But for me, it's like, I think I found this community of people who know exactly what I have gone through my whole life. And, I grew up with them. People ask me a lot, like, where did the inspiration for Demeter come from? And it's from my mom, who is bipolar and she's a narcissist. And recently I've had to shut her out of my life because she just is mean. And I'm like, I'm 32 years old. I don't deserve this. And when I realized I didn't deserve it anymore, it just like changed my whole life, my whole perspective on everything. And and I thought about that, like, you know, people get really mad, and in particular in my Hades and Persephone Saga. So like people just don't communicate. And I'm like, communication's not a trope. It's a real life thing that we struggle with if you grew up in a household where if you spoke out, you were hurt. And I'm so grateful for people who didn't have to experience that. That was not my life. So I grew up thinking that it was better to be silent than to speak out for anything. You can't, you know, just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the outcome. So, you know, you just do what you have to. You get to a point, my age 32, where you can make a decision to hold a boundary, right? My readership, there's a strong part of my readership who understands that and can relate to that. And this book is all about survival, but not even survival on like this everyday level. It's survival in this whole world that is actually literally like our world, I think, is trying to kill us. This world is trying to kill us all. So it just seemed fitting to dedicate it to everyone who's ever struggled like that. And you'll know if it speaks to you or not. So, yeah. Sorry, that was...
Don't apologize.
I know it's something we should stop doing, right? Stop apologizing.
Well, thank you for sharing. Like, I know dealing with narcissistic parents is not my personal experience, but that of people very close to me. And I know that people will think that, I think. And it's a hard decision to make to set that boundary. And it's definitely one that is old.
Yeah, you feel really guilty, and you're like, did I do the right thing? But if you don't deserve it, you've never deserved that behavior. You know, it's like, yeah, it's a big deal. But you're not a bad person for choosing to set boundaries for yourself. You're not a bad person for choosing yourself first. And this society especially encourages women to be selfless for other people, to sacrifice yourself for other people. You don't have to do that, and you're not a bad person if you choose yourself first.
And I think that's something I want to like struggle with all the time.
Yeah.
As women, like the need to be useful. And,
yeah.
Like,
yeah, I remember
opposed
just
to...
like as a child, just wanting to be helpful, like feeling like I was the problem, like constantly the problem, because I had to have been. If my mom was always upset with me, like I had to be the problem, right? And I, until very recently, you know, I realized like I'm not the problem. So I think, yeah.
Again, not my experience, but in my very close person in my life.
Yeah.
You're not
yeah. Well, and I think that's the goal of like Queen of Myth and Monsters is like you can tell like people who are ready to read a book like this and they're ready to take back their power. And I think that's the goal is at the end of this book, if you feel like you can conquer the world, I did something right. If at the end of this book you are angry, I did something right.
I think that's a cool takeaway to think about like at the end of the book in terms of like reading to be angry. Really...
Yeah.
No, I think it's a really productive.
I think it's interesting. People don't expect this from a romance author, right? They don't expect us to be intelligent. They don't expect us to be thoughtful. They don't expect us to write books that empower women sexually and also empower women to take back their power. It's very bizarre to me because every romance I've ever read has been empowering in some form for women. But instead, you're a romance writer and you make it big, you know, you become a joke. You know, people are jokingly reading your books on national television. They're insulting the fact that you did empower a large group of women. And I hate that. It's like every time someone, like women have a win in some form, it's just a joke. and I'm really fucking sick of it. So that's something that we get to change, right? We get to change like how people view romance and how people view us. And I think we're off to a pretty good start. I think book talk helps a lot. So
I have a feminist read romance t-shirt I like to wear while I teach, and I teach writing and literature, and students are often very surprised by it.
yeah,
Not in a bad or mean way, but just kind of in a, like, what does that mean? Like, I'm like, well, this book's about women, and you're supporting women, and
yeah. It's very, yeah. I have a lot of examples of it, but
slight segue. I'm really good at segues.
well, I clearly was too, because Black Belt Brides is back there, and I'll call you that for the remainder of the.
What character do you think readers will be most surprised by in book 2?
Can I answer that? Is that a? I don't know. If
I mean, you don't need to say why.
I think probably
surprised.
all of them actually, just because I jokingly, not so jokingly, call this book the one in which everyone gets a backstory, because that's pretty much what happens. But I think maybe I think the surprise will be how you feel so conflicted at the end. Just because everyone has a reason for all the actions that they take, and but I like that because I think society is like this just like really big morally gray area where like anyone could be fighting for their side and really and strongly believe in that. And what does that look like? So maybe it's everyone. The best answer to that is everyone.
So in QMM, we do, sorry, this is gonna make me laugh because of something we talked about earlier. We get some chapters from Adrian's point of view.
Yeah.
Why was it important for you to include his perspective in this book?
I felt like he was talking. I am like such a ridiculous author. If I just feel like something has to happen, I do it. I think it was important for you to understand somewhat of his motives in the book and how he was. The interesting thing about Adrian is that he's constantly lived in the past, and when he does find Isolde, he suddenly has to live for the present and the future, and he does not know how to do that. He's really bad at it. And I think he also expected for everything to sort of be right in his world when he found Isolde, and then it wasn't. Like this one part, this thing he always wanted was finally there. And I think we all do that as humans. We all kind of like, when I just get there, then everything will be perfect. Like if I could just, win $1 million, everything would be perfect. And then you get there and it's like, oh wait, I have all these other issues. And that's Adrian. But I thought he would have more chapters, and he ended up with 3, I think. But as I was writing, it was still Isolde's story, and I just don't think I could have added any more from his perspective. I think what is there is enough. But yeah, it was interesting that they were very hard to write because he is just I hate writing male points of view. So I do it all the time, but God, I just hate it.
Was there anything you liked?
I don't know.
My next question was there anything particularly enjoyable or not enjoyable about switching between them?
It's just hard. It's a mindset shift, and I don't know. It was very hard to do, and it's hard because the thing about Adrian is he speaks differently, and so I would write a sentence and I would be like, that's not how he would say that, or he and then I would have to like, well, how would he say it? And so he spoke different in my head. I don't know if it comes off the page the same way, but in my brain it was very different.
I think they have very distinct voices.
I hope so. I don't ever, once you're in it for so long, you're like, I hope this is good. I hope this makes sense. I hope all these things. But I don't think my editor would have let me publish it if it hadn't been. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the whole book, the reason the book was hard is because obviously very emotional. But then in addition to that, I had to put 100K on the page in a month. And I thought I had like a million mental breakdowns. I was just like, I never want to do that again, but I do it to myself every fucking time I write a book. So I haven't learned my lesson yet. I have not learned it. So yeah, it was just challenging. Now I look more favorably upon QMM than I do Retribution, because Retribution will continue to be the bane of my existence, and it was so hard to write. But yeah, QMM. I kind of knew what QMM was doing. I thought I did, and then I didn't know, and that was the hard part about it, is that I thought I knew what was going to happen. I usually always know where my books are going to end. I did not know where this one was going to end, and then I had 26K of it written. And then I went to Chicago to write. I usually go to write in Chicago with my editor, just because it's easy to turn around and be like, I need to brainstorm. And I realized that 26K was wrong. It was the tone, the voice was off. So I started rewriting it. And that's when by chapter 3, I was like, this is not the book I thought it was. And I think that was the hard part. So I feel loopy. I'm so sorry. I'm so tired.
Well, it's not 6:30, so do we have any?
Do you guys want to ask
I have more questions, but
Any audience questions? Yes, we got one right there.
Me? So I know you said you did a lot in the afterward of the book and also during this session. You did a lot of your research on like Eastern European lore and stuff.
Mhm.
Did you ever look into the like hysteria and the witch hunt in America in like the 1600s?
Mm-mm. No, I based most of it off of James the First, I think. In particular, like I think it was James the First. It could have been the third. I don't remember at this point. There was in particular the situation that happens with Ravenna was directly inspired by that, because he had a woman who claimed that she could look at people and tell that they were a witch, and I thought that was a very interesting power for a woman to choose to take on during that time. So I mostly just went with that, and then yeah.
I guess the reason I ask is because I remember when I was learning about that in school,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it like centered around I forget where it began, but it basically became just everyone was accusing
Everyone.
but
Mhm.
it was even like women who were very well respected in their
Mhm.
society, all of a sudden
Yeah, it's a
they're
very
being
powerful
accused of,
weapon.
like, things that even today are considered a horror character of a woman specifically, like
Mhm.
like I woke up with basically that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I liked reading this book actually because I remember when I was learning about that in school.
Mhm.
A couple of three of the most like famous accused women in the U.S. Witch hunts were my ancestors, and everyone in that school. It was a pretty small private school.
Mhm.
Everyone knew each other's last name, and that's my last name.
Mhm.
So it was interesting to kind of learn about that. I'd known about it from because it was just kind of passed down through my family and stuff.
Mhm.
But I didn't know how much of a big deal it was in U.S. history. So it was interesting to learn about.
It does not have any boundary, right? And it's happened forever. And it's such a powerful weapon to create fear.
Yeah.
So someone will turn to you. And that's kind of what I thought was so interesting with James, is that he needed a way for his public to turn to him and meet him. So what do? You accuse people of witchcraft. You create fear. We do it now in a lot of ways. And it's terrifying, because I think it could happen at any point, right? It's happening in a lot of ways now. None of this stuff goes away. Human nature just stays the same, and history often repeats itself. It's very disheartening. But I'm sorry for your ancestors.
Do you want me to repeat the questions into the mic?
I'm also typing them in chat.
There's one question here very early. Yeah.
So I know you said Retribution was hard for you to write because of the themes But was Hades or Adrian more difficult to write perspective-wise?
I don't know that it was like their voices. For Adrian, it was partly his voice. The reason Retribution was hard is because I don't write those books simultaneously. So I would do stupid stuff like be like, I was at a meeting, and I'm like, what meeting, Hades? Like, and I did it in Malice. I'm reading Malice now to prep for Chaos, and I was like, why did I do this? That's why that book was hard. But they're both different. They're both hard for different reasons. Hades, when I write Hades, I feel like I go into depression. It's so like, God. And I remember starting it, Retribution, and being like, why are you like this? And I know I wrote him, but still, I do feel in some way that I don't have control over how I sound. But he was so depressing. And but Adrian had a darkness to him that was very heavy. And I'm kind of witchy. But I had to keep a jar of salt on my desk because the energy was so awful. And so you can't carry that around with you. So I don't know how to answer that really, but Retribution I think was hard for different reasons than it was like jumping into his voice.
BJ, and then
Hi.
Hi. How do I get two-parter? Okay. One, does Isolde family or her mom's family or people get justice in this book? And then two,
That's okay. The answer is no, not in this book. I did think we would get to at least see it, but or be on the precipice of it, but we weren't. And that I thought we were going in that direction to the end, but we're going to have to get there in the third book. Yeah.
there is a
Oh yeah. Yes, I will end it where I ended it. No, there will be a third book. Yeah. So we have that one's going to be rough. We're thinking early 2024. So before anyone asks, get ahead of the game.
And I'm really nosy as a reader because I tend to ask all things this, but what is on back burner for you? Do you have like things like in the works besides these two projects? I
don't even know how to answer this question. I mean, always, I guess. I just, for fun, I wrote a Grimm. I think if any of you follow me on Instagram, I've been teasing a Grimm retelling. It's a novella. I just finished it. We'll have more information on that soon. Yeah, I love it. It's so stupid. I love it. It's so dumb. But it's like, it takes a bunch, it's like kind of like typical Scarlett St. Clair, where I take from a lot of different like myths and weave them into a whole story. And then, I've got a million projects, like, people always ask me if I'm going to do Aphrodite and Hephaestus. If you followed me for any length of time, the answer is yes. Ariadne and Dionysus, the answer is yes. Like, so just a bunch of different things. I can't not work. I was supposed to be resting between now and the time I have to write Gods and Chaos. So I'm writing those back to back. And I didn't. I wrote a novella instead. But it's so fun and so dumb, and I just think it's great, and it made me love writing again because there's no pressure. Like,
well, that's part of like the. But is it like the rest and the rejuvenation? That's the rejuvenation that you need, right? So it's not just like rest on its own. You need to like reinvigorate it.
Yeah, it was really. So I think what we're gonna do is kind of I alternate those. I know I promised like a Song of Sorrow for a long time, and it'll happen. But it's very emotional, and I needed something that was just kind of stupid fun. So no. Yeah, in the new year. So we'll have a bunch of announcements like in the next couple of weeks, probably like in January. So I mean, clearly it's almost here, right? I keep forgetting. I don't know what day it is. I forgot it was New Year's. I Christmas feels like it was a year ago. Like I can't. These whole 2 weeks have been insane. But yeah, information is coming.
Sorry, my like habit from teaching is like I like count off.
There's a lot
and
of
then
you
go
at
back
once.
to it. So that people don't have to like continue like, that's a lot of work.
Raise your hand.
I have bad shoulders.
So, okay, so I guess for all your books, like, how do you figure out like what's the plot gonna be? Like, do you just like write, or you think about like a book and then you like brainstorm and then write it out and then like slowly go up to it, or how do you normally do your books when it comes to like plots and
Well, a plot is a series of actions. So I let my character decide. And something I play a game with them called Decision and Consequence. So every decision they make has a consequence, and every consequence has a new decision, so on and so forth. And that's how I form my plots.
and then you create like these like random, or maybe not, maybe because I know you do your research, like monsters of like all these different creatures, and you're just like, whoa, and then like
Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I don't know how I do it. I've been doing this for a long time. I've written since I was 13 years old, and this, it has taken a lot of time to get here. And I will say that when people tell me that even when my editor, like today, she texted me randomly and was like, "You're such a great writer," and I was like, "This is fucking weird." Like, I never thought I would be in a situation where people would tell me I was a great author or that my words meant something to them. And I think to be here, to a lot of people, they think I came on the scene with a touch of darkness. Like, people think that I was an instant success. I was not. I've been working at this since I was 13. And I would read all kinds of books about how to improve. I would go to critique groups. I was a part of SCBWI for a long time, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Because at the time I thought I was going to be a YA writer. So I've had my heart broken a million times. I've been told no a million times, and I just kept going. So there's a part of me that doesn't know how I do this, but I know that writing is in my soul. And I don't do this for money. I do this because I have no choice. My soul would not let me do anything else. So sometimes when people ask me how I do these things, I'm like, I really don't know. But I think your characters will guide you. And then that's how I would write. And you can call it character driven if you want. I don't really know if that's the case. I don't really know what that means. But I think they'll tell you their story and they'll tell you what happens. And that's how it comes together for me.
I just feel like you're behind a computer, you're just literally just like typing away and then
I just do. I feel like the issue, like what I don't write like I write. I don't interact with the world when I am writing a book, and I'm trying to get away from that. But I get into a point where I talk to no one. I don't answer my phone. I don't do anything, and I'm just in that world. I guess it's a little bit like when actors do like method acting or whatever. But because it's just you just do it. You just put words on a page, and I think the real magic comes from editing too, because editing is fun. I love editing because it's where you make your world more vibrant. It's where you add all of the emotional things. It's where you make the book the book. So I don't know if that's helpful.
it is, but I can also just, you're awesome, you're amazing.
Thank you.
Just see how your mind works.
It's chaos.
Yeah.
That's the theme. In case you didn't know already, the theme of 2023 is chaos.
Well, it's 2022.
Well, my head type of chaos is coming out. We all know that's going to be chaos, but yeah, this is good chaos though. Good chaos. Hi.
Out of all of your characters, like think about all of them. Which one is your favorite to write and why?
God, I don't know. I like them all for different reasons. I've been reading Malice, and I started reading Malice, and I was like, oh my God, this is actually good. And because I thought I would hate it, so much, and I love it. I love all my characters for different reasons, and Persephone is, will always be close to my heart because without Persephone, there wouldn't be as old. And Persephone really helped me, like with the trauma over my mom and like growing up and all of that. And So I feel like I became who I was by writing her. And Isolde is who I aspire to be. Still working on that one. She's unapologetic, and I still apologize. But then there's, Hermes and Hecate, who are so fun. And anytime they just jump on the page, they just make me laugh so much. And I think that's why I love writing this Grimm retelling so much, is because it's just like, it's probably what Hermes and Hecate would write themselves. It's just like so funny and lighthearted, and we don't get a lot of that in my books at this point. So I love them all for different reasons, and everyone asks me for a favorite, and I'm like, oh, I don't have a favorite. I love them all for different reasons, and they represent some part of my life, I think, and so I think I connect maybe too emotionally with my characters, because I'm like, they're all parts of me. I love them all.
Which ones would be invited to the slumber party?
They all would, because you could make fun of Hades for being the goth in the room.
True.
You have to bring the ones that you yeah, you gotta bring them, and it's a whole thing. Even the ones Saphira, I love writing her because I don't like dynamics of girl on girl hate, and I remember I told myself in A Touch of Darkness, I would only do Minthy and Persephone, I would only do that, and then it had to change with Luce, and that was going to be hard because in mythology, Luce is the one that Hades cheats on Persephone with. You can't really tell where Minthy came into the mix, but so I was like, how do I do that? And I think it worked out really well, but I just knew I couldn't do the girl on girl hate. And then for Saphira, we have Isolde in such a world that I think unfortunately that world lends itself to that sort of thing. But I think she's definitely I don't know that she's necessarily redeemable, but I think her character definitely bounces back. So I love opportunities like that. That's a challenge for me, and I like to create challenges, as you probably can tell by the ending of both Malice and QMM. So
we have a question from our online viewers.
Okay.
How do you begin to create your characters? This is from Emily.
Oh, I don't know. They just have a voice. They just talk. It's easy. I will say that Greek mythology lends itself very well to giving you the personalities of the characters. If you're reading the right myths, you just see it. But Adrian and Isolde, I think just it's the circumstances of their world, and I think their parts of them are very much influenced by my own viewpoints and my own experiences in life. So I guess they probably come from me and the change I want to see in the world, and that kind of or how I view the world in the present moment. So maybe that's it. I don't know. I don't. Clearly, I don't think very long on some of these things. I'm like, there's someone talking to me. I will write it down and we go for it. So yeah.
Yeah, we have time for a couple more.
Are you at any point in the beginning of either of your book series, are you going to make a pronunciation guide? Because I can't be the only one who's realized that I have butchered half of the
yeah, I didn't think about it. We're working on one for the website. Actually, I have to work on one for the website, which is why it's not done yet. So coming to you. One of those things maybe I'll get to in January. We'll see. Yeah, I know. I won't be doing it in the next 2 days. But I always, it irritates me to even do pronunciation because people are always like, you pronounce that wrong. And I'm like, it's my book. Shut up. But also, if we're being legit, Hades, we wouldn't pronounce that with an H. If we're in Greece, then we just, you don't pronounce the H's. It's Hades, right? I'm not going to say that. You can say that if you want. Yeah, Hermes. We wouldn't say Hermes. We'd say Hermes. I'm not going to say that. I'm sorry. I am not. So. I know. It changes the whole phrase. No. but is an Isolde. They're like, I thought it was Isolde, and I was like, just leave me alone. I've never pronounced it that way. I've never seen it. I've never heard it pronounced that way in America. I'm sorry, I'm American. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. So that's sometimes why I hesitate to do it, because I'm like, oh, I know I'm going to be told I'm wrong. Just like I don't answer the question about fan casting anymore because everyone tells me I'm wrong about my own characters. I'm like, we're not playing that game. You lost your privileges. I'm sassy. I'm sorry. Not sorry. I'm really not. I just ignore it. When people ask me, I'm like, I'm going to ignore you. I'm not going to answer the question.
Cross out another question.
When people ask me about Adrian and Isolde, and I'm like, I don't have fan cast for them because I see them as like anime characters in my head. Because Adrian was based off this like really hot fan art of Sauron on Pinterest. And I was like, that's how I see him now. And if I had that fan art because Lord of the Rings is my first fandom, my life would have turned out very different. Yeah, I think you guys probably know which fan art I'm talking about too. And then there are all these really hot portraits of Melkor, and I'm like, oh, Melkor, I never looked at you this way. So the funny thing is like the fan art of Melkor really inspired what all the elven princes look like in my Grimm retelling. So they all look like some variation of this Melkor fan art on Pinterest. Thank God for Pinterest. I know, I love it. It's fantastic. I remember when I first saw fan art of my books for the first time, and I was like, I've made it. It was the most amazing thing ever. It's like, oh, it's so cool. So cool.
I always think about that with it must be similar when you get a Lego for something.
I've never thought of that before. Someone make
me,
one.
that's the epitome of fame.
They do
Having
that?
a Lego person.
Yeah, I was thinking more of a pop,
That's you. Pedro Pascal stole
I'm
this.
just gonna. I mean, if someone made one of me, I would steal it. 100%.
Right?
Yeah. Mine would be someone it would probably be Bailey Sarian, but people say I look like her, so I would just take hers. That's what I would do.
Yeah, one or two.
If you remember your question.
I do. I think she had her hand first.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how you pronounce the name of the Queen of Bela. That's the hardest one for me.
George? George.
A lot of, G's, H's.
Yeah, it's George. It's George. I was like, wait a minute, which one is he? It's a Romanian spelling, so it's really weird, but yeah, it's a vibe, man. It's a vibe. I'm chill if you're chill. I don't. Okay. Do you want to ask your question that you remembered?
Say thank you for making Isolde by Fox.
Oh yeah.
I was like, so black or close. I was feeling good. I like that.
Yeah. So I'm Indigenous, but obviously I present white, and people think they think I'm white, or they think I'm mixed with something, which I hear all the time. But I thought it was I just wanted to write a book where brown skin was normative instead of being something that we focus on, or is part of the plot, or she's discriminated against. I just wanted her to be able to exist powerfully in her skin, because I don't get to either. Even though, when you come from an Indigenous community, part of our constitution in Oklahoma for the Muscogee Nation is you're a full citizen if you have half or more blood. And you're not a full citizen if you have less than that, right? So there's a lot of discrimination in the tribe. And so you've never quite, even though you have these experiences that a lot of Native kids have, you still don't quite fit into that role, right? You're not Native enough. And then all the white people want to be like, well, I wish I had all those benefits. And it's like, fuck you, man. So it was really important to me to write a character that, my friends could relate to, and someone that I could sort of work through my issues of not belonging, and just, feel like normative. And we don't get that a lot. Even with my LGBTQ plus rep, like I'm known for being normative. And I'm like, that's just how I live my life. Like I just live my life like this. So that was really important to me. So it's really nice to hear that. And it's a question I get asked a lot. Like, why did you write about a brown woman? And I'm like, well, here's my explanation. This is the life that I have lived. And we share similar experiences. Like Isolde's experiences are my experiences. And the way that she feels about her mother's people, it's how I feel about my people. It's a little traumatic in some ways, where you're trying to come to terms with who you are. And I struggle with it. I still struggle with it. I was afraid to talk about being part of the Muscogee Nation, and I had to talk to my sister about it. All my family works for the nation. It's like a family reunion every time we go to the clinic, right? And if you're Native, you get it. And I had to talk to her about it and say, like, do I do this? And she said, you have to be proud of your heritage. But I was afraid of being judged by my tribe for doing it. I was afraid of being told I wasn't Native enough. So yeah. So thank you. I'm glad that you felt seen.
No, there's a couple questions.
Yeah.
So, one is from Carol. How much creativity do you get in the covers?
Oh, I have say in the cover. Yeah, I collaborate with Regina Wamba and Emily Wittig. Some of you may be familiar with Emily, but I have full control over my covers. So mostly what I do is send her a Pinterest board. And I'm like, here are the symbols, Pinterest. Thank God for Pinterest. What would we do without that modern search engine? I send her a Pinterest board. I'm like, these are the symbols that I want. And Queen of the Monsters has white butterflies on the front. There are no white butterflies in that book at all, but they do represent change and empowerment. And I was seeing white butterflies the whole time I was writing that book, so they had to go on the front. So they're significant of Isolde's journey. They're not actually in the book.
And this will be the last question, I think. But it's thank you. This is from Richard. Thank you for being vulnerable tonight. We're fast losing the ability to speak from our hearts in front of people. Question: have any of your characters spoken back to you and changed your perspective and view?
I don't know if they changed my. It's interesting. I guess in some ways they have changed my perspective and view because writing them is how I change, and it's in little things like being able to cut my mom off was a big deal, and I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't written Persephone and Isolde. And then being able to talk more openly about my tribe and sort of like the trauma surrounding that. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't started writing about Isolde. So I think they do change you, but on a fundamental level if you let them. But I also write in a different way. I think I just write very personal things, and but if it can change people and if it can change the world, I'll continue to do it. So I like that question. Thank you.
So the last small question that I'll ask is the question that I like to. It is small. Okay. Sometimes people get stressed, but it is a small question.
I can make any small question into like a long-winded answer anyway.
It is a twist on the book recommendation question.
Oh.
But what I like to ask authors, if somebody wanted to get to know you better, what book would you recommend they read other than your own?
Oh God. I know. It depends on what era of my life I'm in.
Like, what would you most want somebody to know? Like, which?
I want everyone to read Witch by Lisa Lister and When God Was a Woman. I forget who that's by, but just When God Was a Woman is a very unique title. Because that just changed my perspective on like how to exist in this world as a woman. So yeah, but you should also read. I was a librarian for 5 years. You should also read The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie, which was my first romance novel ever, and I loved it. I read a lot of Regency and Highlander romance. If you were ever curious about what I read, so I read it and tell me what you think. I would love to know.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of other Regency books.
I hope so.
On that note, thank you so much for sharing everything. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it was kind of laughed at, so I genuinely do think it's important to read books that make us mad.
Yeah, I do.
I like reading books that make me mad. I think that it's invigorating in a different way. I don't always read books that make me mad, but
No, I think. Well, I mean, just like I had to write a book that made me mad, and then write a book that made me laugh. You know.
Yeah.
So
balance is
Yeah.
important.
that
But
is my theme for 2023 is balance
and chaos.
and chaos. Balance and the chaos. That's exactly what I'm going for, actually, because we tend to neglect ourselves when we get busy, and I don't want to do that again. But, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.